Word association. Nice, nice. What's next? That's it. Anybody got a birthday? No birthday? Okay. Anything special? All right. Well, then we'll pray, and then we will break the classes. All right. Ready? Let's pray. Thank you, God, for a great day. Thank you so much for being our God. And I just pray that you'll help us as we go into our classes. Will help us to be attentive, help us to learn, help us to know what it is that you want us to do and how we should live in this world. And help us to know that one day we'll be with you in heaven. I just pray that you'll be with each person here and be with those who are away and keep them safe and bring them back safe. We love you so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, go to class. High school, stay here. Jody's going to be teaching.
Like soon or just sometime Thursday? Okay, very cool. That's exciting. What else? That's good. What else? Anybody else got anything exciting going on? How much longer of school do we got?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Everybody at 3 weeks? Anybody less? Anybody more? 0? Are you?
I'm out.
You're out? Are you? What kind of school you do?
I'm homeschooled, but I go to school.
Gotcha.
I got out recently.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Very cool. So 3 weeks, 0 weeks. Anybody got any cool summer plans they're super pumped about? Any cool vacations planned? Okay, nice, very cool. Where's that at? Okay, very cool. What week is that? That is 7th. Okay. Wow, I didn't realize it was that long. So that's like 3 weeks. That's exciting. That's good. What else? What else is good? Let's hear one more thing.
Dad's graduating soon.
Okay, we didn't think it If you have your Bible, open it up to Isaiah chapter 30. Isaiah chapter 30. I know some of y'all have been reading through Isaiah. I know some of y'all haven't been reading through Isaiah. But we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 30. Remind me, for those that are doing the word association, you're not initially doing like, hey, do chapter 30 today, right? You're just kind of reading through it at your own pace. Is that how it's working right now? Okay. But I think if you kind of are dividing it up, I think you should be. Wait, are you supposed to be done with Isaiah in April? Through 39. Okay, so you should be around chapter 30 right now if you're kind of following it. And that's why I picked this passage, because I thought it'd probably either be a chapter that y'all recently read, or maybe it'll be one that you're about to read this week. And this is just a passage that I found interesting. I think that we can learn about a lot about God and how He interacts with us through Isaiah's writing in Isaiah chapter 30, specifically looking at verses 18 through 26. So what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and jump into reading this first verse. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 18, this is talking about, which pretty much all of Isaiah is talking about a bad situation that happened, and what's going to, or the situation that's happening. Usually it's Israel, God's people doing something they shouldn't be doing. And He's prophesying that there's going to be bad consequences about that. But even in those bad consequences, there's going to be some good come out of it. If you read Isaiah, that's pretty much what happens over and over and over again, right? That Isaiah is pronouncing some type of punishment or judgment, but also he always usually gives a little bit of glimmer of hope. So in this passage, we're seeing kind of more of the glimmer of hope. But specifically in this passage, I think we can learn a lot about God and how He responds to us and how we can respond to Him. So I'm going to go ahead and read this verse for us, just this one verse. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 18.
Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and therefore He waits on high to have compassion on you, for the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are all those who long for Him.
Read one more time, please.
Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and therefore He waits on high to have compassion on you, for the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are all those who long for Him.
Alright, so I want to play just like a quick word game. When I say a word, I want you to say like what you think of as the opposite. There's no right or wrong. But like when I say cat, dog, okay. When I say land, water, okay. Let's get a little bit more abstract, I guess. If I say hard, soft. I was thinking easy, but okay, soft. That's good. When I say difficult, okay. What about when I say thankful? Ungrateful. Okay. What about when I say happy?
Sad.
What about when I say mad? Happy. Okay. What about love? Okay. Hatred. What about anger? Okay. What about mercy? Wrath. Ungrateful. No mercy. What about gracious? Ungracious? Okay, really? All the juniors and seniors are gone. Haven't got to that part. No, just kidding. What about justice? Injustice. Okay. I think we've exhausted maybe our mental capacity so far. When I read this verse, there's two words that are just put in there and they describe God, but when you really think about it, well, I say when you really think about it. When you really think about it, it makes sense. But if you just kind of are evaluating these two words, and at least the way that I think about these, they don't immediately click for me. And those two words were on the title, gracious and just. Gracious and just, or gracious and justice. What is gracious? What does that mean? maybe let's go back to that root word, grace. What is grace? Dude, say that again. Okay, giving someone something they don't deserve, specifically a good thing, right? We think of grace and graciousness as being good, right? What else? When you think of the word grace or graciousness or gracious, what comes to mind? Mercy? Okay, yeah, absolutely. That kind of rings in my mind as two words that are similar. What else? What images come to mind when you think of grace? What feelings? What words? What do you associate with grace, graciousness, and gracious?
Elegant.
Okay, elegance. I like that. Good. What else? Forgiveness? Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Humility, like,
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What else? That's good. I think we're getting a pretty good picture of what grace and graciousness is all about. What about in the Bible, maybe a character? I like to always kind of think of, when I think of words and I'm trying to kind of really understand those words, I kind of like to paint the picture or associate that with someone. So for example, if I say humble, a lot of times we think of Moses, right? Because there's that passage where it said Moses was the most meek of all men on earth. So I think of Moses. When I think of king, I think of course, Jesus, but the first person that comes to my mind when I think about king. Well, let me ask you that. Who's the first person that comes to your mind in the Bible when you think about king? King David, yeah, that's one that I thought of as well. What about missionary? Who comes to your mind? Oh, yeah. So, what about grace? Graciousness. Jesus? Yeah. Anybody else? Who said that? God, yeah. Anybody else come to mind when you think of grace, graciousness? Think of Mary. I think God chose her because of probably her graciousness. She's also very gracious in accepting that God chose her. So I wanted to just kind of paint this picture and really let us sit in what grace and graciousness is. And it's this warm, fuzzy feeling of forgiveness and mercy and humility. And I think as y'all are describing that, that's a place I want to be, right? And I want to be around people who are gracious. What about justice? What comes to mind when you think of justice? A court? Okay. Has anybody ever been in a court? You don't have to explain exactly what was going on. That might be a little bit TMI. Has anybody ever been in a courtroom? Did you get warm, fuzzy feelings there? No. I've been in a courtroom a few times, and not that it necessarily, it can be a bad place, but it's a place of justice. Hopefully it is a place of justice. And sometimes justice doesn't always feel warm and fuzzy, right? When I think about justice, you said earlier, beautiful definition of grace is getting something, specifically a good thing that you don't deserve. For example, forgiveness. God gives us forgiveness, and we don't deserve it, right? If someone gives you $1 million for doing nothing, like you didn't deserve that, right? That was just a gift of grace. And we painted this beautiful, warm, fuzzy picture of what grace is all about. When you probably think of someone that is a person that exemplifies grace, you probably think of someone that's just wonderful to be around. But when you think about the word justice, it's not a bad word, right? It's not the same as being necessarily rude or mean or angry, but it definitely doesn't bring, at least in my mind, warm, fuzzy feelings. When you think of the word just and justice, what are some things that come to mind? Whether they're words or feelings or attitudes or people?
Not biased.
Okay, not biased. Okay, yeah. Which is, I love that you said that, because grace, even though they're both really good things, and both of these things are used to describe God, and they're at the core of who God is, grace is almost the exact opposite of that. Grace is giving bias, right? Grace is saying, hey, I choose you, even though maybe I shouldn't, right? Whereas justice is being unbiased. And God is just. The Bible also tells us, we might say, oh, if you're a farmer, God, thank you so much for this wonderful rain that is going to help my crops produce, which is going to provide for my family, which is going to help me give back to the community. But you know what? The faithful farmer who lives on this side of the road receives the rain, but what about the farmer on the other side of the road who's not faithful? Does he receive the rain too? Yeah, sometimes it rains on the good, and it also rains on the bad. So yeah, being God's justice it's unbiased. I love that. What else? What are some other just images, words, people, places, things that come to mind when you think about just and justice? A judge, yeah, absolutely. Who else? What else? Consequences, okay, yeah, absolutely. Justice, at least our justice system has consequences, right? Someone say something, Fairness, okay, yeah, absolutely. What else? Anybody else got anything that comes to their mind? I think for me, a lot of times, when I think about justice, it's something I want, right? I want things to be fair. And when I'm in a courtroom, I don't want the judge to be biased. But if he is going to be biased, I want him to be biased towards me, right? But I definitely don't want him to be biased against me. But justice doesn't always come with warm, fuzzy feelings. And a lot of times we associate justice with kind of cold things, and maybe sometimes even heartless things. I don't think they have to be that, but sometimes those are the feelings we get, especially if we compare it. It's one thing if we just start talking about justice, and you could probably be like, I love justice. But then when you compare justice to graciousness, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, graciousness sounds, I'll take that, right? So, all that said, this passage, and I want to read it one more time. So I'm going to read it for us. I know we read it twice, but I really want it to sink in. So I'm going to read it for us one more time.
Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and therefore he waits on high to have compassion on you. For the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are those who long for it.
So how in this one same verse, and it doesn't even say, and God is gracious, oh, and he is, it just kind of matter-of-factly says, God is gracious, and then it also states that he's a God of justice. How can we reconcile both these things into one being? What do you think about that? How is God both gracious and justice?
Well, it says he longs to be gracious, and he wants to be gracious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want us to hang on to that. We're going to talk about that very thing in just a minute too, because I think that's beautiful. But what do y'all think? How can someone be both just, full of justice, full of graciousness? Is it possible? Yeah, absolutely. When you think about, maybe again, let's think about what would it look like for a person to be so gracious, but also so just? Like a human person, what would that look like? Okay.
Someone who, like, you have to give discipline to your child, but you also will, it's also your responsibility to hold a grudge against your child, because, like, they might not put it in there, especially a little child.
Sure, yeah. I think a parent, of course, I don't know everybody's situation in here. There are good parents and there are bad parents, right? And sometimes our parents can be both, because they're humans. I was very blessed with wonderful parents, but they still weren't perfect. I hope that you were blessed with wonderful parents. But not everybody is, right? But a parent, at least the way that God designed it, I think is actually a really good example of someone who is both gracious and just. And when you think about like the stereotypical family dynamics, and I didn't think about this until you mentioned this, but a parent really does have to be, yes, gracious, because they have to understand that you are just a 3-year-old, or just a 17-year-old, or a 12-year-old, or however you may be, and mistakes are going to happen. And then you are also human, and you also get hungry and make bad decisions when you're hungry, right? When you haven't had your Snickers, or you haven't had your 8 hours of sleep, or whatever it is. And so, you know, we all say things probably at times when we're at our worst. And hopefully our parents can kind of help us with that. On the other hand, our parents are also tasked with training us and disciplining us and raising us to be better than we are, to help us grow and mature. And so them being just and fair is also a big part of their job. When I think about maybe a good example of someone, you know, I think about like the stereotypical grandparent. Stereotypical grandparent, they don't really have to worry as much about the justice part, right? You know, the stereotypical grandparent is probably a little bit more grace than justice, right? Because, hey, mom and dad's job is to be the justice part. Grandparents can be a little bit more grace. And I think even in, like, again, I don't know everybody's family dynamics, but again, if you've got like a stereotypical, traditional family where you've got a mom and a dad, sometimes the mom can kind of be more the gracious side and the dad can be a little bit more the justice side. Or maybe vice versa. But I guess the point is, both of these things, even though they can seem opposite, they actually are a wonderful complement to one another. Because we need God to be fair. We need Him to be unbiased. We need Him to make sure that things are, that there's discipline that is taking place when that is needed. Otherwise, we would never grow and mature. We would never be able to realize the promises and the blessings that He provided for us. On the other hand, we need a God that's gracious, because we're not perfect, and we live in a world that's not perfect. Another thing that was already pointed out was the fact that God waits on us. And specifically, He waits on us. It says He waits on us to have compassion. He longs for that. He waits for us to have compassion. I know Emerson you have prom today, right? And I know, again, not trying to, I guess I am making fun of the ladies. I know some of our guys can take long to get ready too. Actually, I'm one of those guys. I like to take long showers. I can get ready in like 3 minutes, but I like to take long showers. My wife's kind of the opposite. She doesn't really like taking long showers, and she doesn't really take that long to get dressed. So this doesn't really apply to my relationship with my wife. But probably all of us, you know, I saw some snickers. Like, maybe it's not true of every woman, but typically, you know, the guy, when it's time to, you know, take pictures, or it's time to go out on a date, or it's time to get ready, usually you're waiting on a woman. This song's like 20 years old now. But have y'all heard the song by Brad Paisley? Y'all know who Brad Paisley is. He doesn't put out much music anymore. But one of my favorite artists, and when I was like middle school and high school, was kind of his heyday in 2000s, I guess. But he put out a song called Waiting on a Woman. And how many of you like to wait? Does anybody like to wait? Nobody likes to wait, right? But all of us have a little bit different tolerance for waiting. Some of us are better at it than others. But almost all of us are better at waiting when it's something that we want, right? And so, for example, if I'm driving down the road, I really like Chick-fil-A, and it's my favorite fast food restaurant. I'm not a huge fan of Captain D's. It's just not my thing. And so if I'm driving down the road and I see that Captain D's has like, and let's just say Chick-fil-A and Captain D's are my only 2 options. And I see that Captain D's has like 7 people in line. That's like, I didn't know 7 people even went to Captain D's. But if I'm driving by, I'm like, that's a kind of a long line for Captain D's. But then you drive by Chick-fil-A and you always see like 20 people who drive through Chick-fil-A, right? But because I really like Chick-fil-A and I don't really like Captain D's, and I also don't really like waiting, which one do you think I'm going to choose? I'm actually going to choose Chick-fil-A because I'm willing to wait. Even though I don't like waiting, I'm willing to wait for Chick-fil-A because I like it. I don't like waiting in lines. I like to be efficient in everything that I do. Not that I'm always really good at it, but I like to be efficient in the things that I do. So like if I'm running errands or something, and not that this is like rocket science, but if I'm running errands, I like to make my errands like in a circle, like kind of like hit things in a circle and make my way back home. That way I'm not just like, oh, I gotta go to Target, and then I gotta go to, whatever, the church building, and then I gotta go back to, JC. Like, no, like I'm gonna go to Target, JC, church home, right? So I like to be efficient because I don't like to wait. But I and my family, we love going to Disney World, and that's not really efficient because you're waiting in a lot of lines. You gotta pay a lot of money, but I enjoy it, so I'm willing to wait. Most of us are similar, right? We all have different tolerances, but you're probably willing to wait in a much more calm and collected and happy manner for something you like as opposed to something that you don't like, right? I'll tell you one thing that I probably wouldn't have a lot of tolerance and patience and waiting capability to do is if let's just say it's a Saturday and I told your great-grandma that I was going to go and help her clean up her yard. I don't really want to help her clean up her yard, but it's a good thing to do, right? Nobody likes to do that. But, if it's your great-great-grandma, like, I want to help her out. Well, if I get there and she says, hey, actually, before you start raking, I'm going to run to the store and just buy some things. And I'm going to go out, I'm going to have some brunch with my girlfriends. And then I'm going to go get my hair done. If you'll just wait for me to do this, and that would be great. You'd be like, I'm here to help you. I'm not going to wait to help you because I don't even really want to do it anyways, right? I'm not going to have very much patience for that. If someone needs my help and then they make me wait to help them, does anybody want to do that? No, because you're like, hey, I'm here to help you. You need to accommodate me, right? Is that pretty much how all of us, is that what God does? It's like literally the opposite of what God does. Now, I'm sure God would rather us hurry up, but it says He waits for us. And He's not waiting for us necessarily to come and love Him. He's waiting so that He can bless us. And that, I think, just shows how much love God has for His people. He anxiously waits for His people to come back, not so He can reprimand them, not so that they can bring Him sacrifices, but so that He can love them, so that He can be gracious to Him. You think about the parable of the prodigal son, right? And how the father waits for his son who went away to come back. The father's not waiting to shake his finger at his son. The father's not waiting to say, I've been waiting for you, now get to work and earn your forgiveness back. That's not what the father does, right? The father waits anxiously, not so that he can reprimand his son, but so that he can love his son. The song Waiting on a Woman, nobody likes to wait, but when you're waiting on something like a good woman, if you're a man, the whole song is about his work, right? But I think that's just beautiful, that God longs, He desires, and He waits for us. And what He's waiting for us to do is to quit being a dummy and be a good person. So it's not even like God is just like, oh, they've got more important, like literally we don't have more important things to do. The Israelites did not have more important things to do. They were delaying God's love and graciousness because they were living sinfully. But God still desired for them to come back so that He could be gracious. That just, again, goes to show how much grace God has. Let's read this passage. continuing on. So I'm going to read verses 19 through 24.
For you people in Zion, inhabitant in Jerusalem, you will weep no longer. He will certainly be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. When he hears it, he will answer you. Although the Lord has given you bread of deprivation and water of oppression, he, your teacher, will no longer hide himself, but your eyes will see your teacher.
I want to think about God as a teacher for a minute, because that's the way that Isaiah portrays him here in this passage. What's one of the worst things, and we don't have to get into if something really bad happens, maybe don't share that. But what are some hard things that your teacher has made you do in class, or a project, or to learn something? Does anybody have an example of the teacher made me do this and it was super duper hard? When I was a senior in high school, and this was something that every senior class did. I don't know if it was part of Oklahoma. I grew up in Oklahoma. I don't know if it's part of Oklahoma curriculum or if it was our specific English teacher. But she made us write. Are y'all familiar with the Canterbury Tales? Okay. She made us write our own Canterbury Tales, which for at the time, a 17-year-old, the longest paper I'd ever wrote was 1, 2, or 3 pages. This is back before we had internet. We had internet, but it wasn't really available. So we were writing research papers by checking out books in the library. But that's the way we wrote research papers back then. We check out books in the library, and we 4 or 5 books. Now, when you write a research paper, you've got 30 resources because you can find them like that. But we were required to use 4 or 5 resources, and we'd have to write a paper. And most of the papers that I actually turned in high school were handwritten. We had computers when I was in high school. It just wasn't really available to every student. And so, we were writing 2 to 3 page papers max. What's the longest paper y'all wrote? Anybody wrote anything longer? What's the longest y'all wrote?
5 or 6 weeks.
Okay, 5 or 6 pages. 6 pages was. So what's the average if your English teacher makes you write? Is 1 to 2 pages kind of standard? 3 or 4. Okay. That's pretty similar. Our freshman, junior, senior papers, they were, 2 to 4, maybe 5 pages. Well, our Canterbury Tales paper was 12 to 15. And it was a huge deal, super hard. And it also wasn't based upon research. You're just making it up, which in some ways maybe sounds easier because you don't have to read books, but then you have to come up with your own story for 12 to 15 pages, as opposed to reading from professional researchers and just copying, what they said. And so, long story short, it was super hard, at least for me back then. And I hated every bit of it. I hated it. I did not like it. And it was just the worst project in high school that I did. But then when I was done, I had this incredible sense of accomplishment. I'd done something that I'd never done before, that I would have never done on my own. And then in college, when I decided to be a Bible major, and a big part, if any of you are wanting to be Bible majors, a big part of being a Bible major is writing papers. Because there's no math test, right? There's no biology dissecting when you're a Bible major. It's a bunch of reading and it's a bunch of writing. And so when I get to college, and it's an easy paper, is 4 to 5 pages, that was easy for me because I just wrote a 14, 15 page document as a 17-year-old. So now as an 18, 19, 21-year-old, writing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pages, I'd already done that before. The point is, I did not like anything about that experience. I didn't want to do it. And if the teacher would have gave me the opportunity to just say, hey, if you just want to quit and get a B, if she would have offered me that, I'd be I'll take a C. I just don't want to do this, right? I probably would have taken a D, but I would probably take my seat. The point is, I'm so thankful for that experience, even though during the midst of it, there really wasn't a whole lot that I liked about it. But it prepared me. God is a teacher, and sometimes a teacher is a little bit more preparation, is a little bit more just than they are gracious, right? Hopefully our teachers can blend both of those, but sometimes our teachers have to be more of the cold-hearted as opposed to the warm, fuzzy feelings. But sometimes a teacher that can blend both of those really good, even though it might be really hard in the moment, it can be something that's actually incredibly beneficial. In this passage that we just read, God's people are making a change for the better, and blessings are coming about that. But Isaiah definitely doesn't gloss over the fact that God is a teacher, and sometimes what that teacher dished out was really hard. He says, although the Lord has given you bread of deprivation and water of oppression, He, your teacher, will no longer hide Himself, but your eyes will see your teacher. What do you think Isaiah meant by God using the bread of people, oppression, and deprivation? Y'all know what deprivation is? Y'all know what the word deprived is? So deprivation is like the action of depriving. So, for example, if you were deprived of food, you went through a period of deprivation in regard to food. So, why would God deprive His people of something? Okay, yeah, to help them appreciate something. Discipline.
To show them that it's really not what they need.
Okay, I like that. Almost kind of like fasting, right? We fast so that we can focus on God and kind of place all the effort that we go into eating and providing for ourselves into kind of putting that energy towards God. Yeah, absolutely. So what we're saying is that God used deprivation as a good thing. God deprived us, and it was a good thing? Is that what you're saying? It can be a good thing, right? Even though in the midst of it, you might not like it at all. How would God use oppression? Why would God put His people through a time and period of oppression? So it's kind of pressing you, offensive towards you, it's kind of control over you, so to speak. Why would God put His people through a period of oppression? Okay. Love that. So, to bring this together, okay, yeah, the Israelites, they should have learned their lesson. Okay, what does that mean for you? Now, maybe you haven't faced the same type of deprivation that the Israelites have. Maybe you haven't felt the same kind of oppression that the Israelites did. But none of our lives are perfect, right? Maybe we have problems with our friends. Maybe we have problems with our family, with our mom, our dad, or someone else in our family, brother or sister. Maybe we have problems at school. Maybe you have internal problems and you face demons and you have mental health challenges, and maybe that is your deprivation. Maybe that is the season of oppression that you're going through. It's so easy, and I say this because I followed this trap as well. It's so easy to think, where is the gracious God that we read about in the Bible? Where is the gracious God when I'm going through the season of life that's so hard and I feel sad and mad and angry And in those moments when it would be so good for God to just give me a wonderful blessing, He gives me what feels like a curse, or just more weight to carry. Maybe you are going through that right now. Maybe you've been through that, but you haven't, you certainly will. It's easy for us to look at history and say, like, oh, well, like, they should have learned that they didn't need a king. They should have learned that they need to just rely on God. It's so easy for us to do that in our shoes now. I think what would be so helpful for you is to think about that right now. The thing that you're going through that's hard. Maybe it's something in school. Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's sports. Maybe it's your academics. Maybe it's your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your best friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. I don't know what it is. But whatever hard thing you're going through right now, doesn't mean you have to be thankful that your relationships are hard, or that your life is hard, or that your health is not great, or that your mind is not great. But I think you can look at those things and think, okay, how is this place of oppression and deprivation, difficulty, struggle, how can a wonderful, loving, gracious God use this? And He can. If He can use Israelite being burnt to ashes for good, He can use whatever it is you're going through for good. And yeah, maybe you're not getting the warm, fuzzy feelings from God right now, but they're still there, and maybe He's just putting you through a difficult project right now to prepare you for something that is even greater or even more difficult that is to come. And so God is a teacher. Sometimes teachers make us feel like we're on top of the world, but sometimes they put us through difficult things to prepare us for the world. We'll just kind of read through this really quick. Your ears will hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. So Isaiah is saying, hey, if you come back to God, you're going to have this voice behind your ear. It just kind of conjured this image for me. You think about the angel on your left, devil on your right kind of thing. If we got God as our teacher, we're going to have someone telling us the way. We're going to have someone telling us what to do. But we have to come back to God. And that's what Isaiah is telling these people. Hey, when you come back, you're going to have an angel on your shoulder. You're going to have God whispering, hey, go this way. Hey, go that way. Also, what's interesting about this is it says, you will scatter, talking about all the bad things, specifically image. Isaiah says, when you come back to God, you will scatter all your images and all the ungodly things, and you will say to them, be gone. And so Isaiah is painting this picture that when you come back to God, He's waiting for you so anxiously. He longs for you to come back so that He can be gracious to you. Once you come back to God and God starts whispering in your ear how to live, which way to go, what to do, your taste will change. Does anybody like LaCroix? Has anybody tried it? It's like, why in the world would anybody ever want to drink this? That's how I felt when I first drank LaCroix. There's like all kinds of jokes about it, like it's, LaCroix tastes like, someone had sparkling water and just drank orange juice and burped it or something like that. Because it's not a real strong, like, lemon flavor or orange flavor. It has like a hint of fruit. When I started first drinking like sparkling water, I didn't like it. But I was trying to quit drinking like Cokes and Gatorades and juice and sugary stuff, sweet teas mostly. And so I started drinking this because it was at least something. And I didn't really like it at first, but now I love it. Like, I would literally rather have one of these than a Dr. Pepper or a Sprite. Like, I don't want those. I want this. My taste buds changed. If you come back to God and you allow God to start whispering in your ear, the things that you desire that are sinful, I'm not saying they're all going to go away, but the things that you maybe just can't kick, those sinful habits, those hateful attitudes, all those things maybe that you don't like about yourself that you also know aren't really a part of who you want to be as a Christian, if you come to God and you let Him whisper in your ear how to live, your appetite for things are going to change. And I've been able to see that very clearly in my life. The things that I desired in high school, money, and fame, and popularity, and being accepted, not to say that those things don't exist for me, but they don't exist at all all to the level that they did when I was your age as they do now. I don't really care about those things now. I don't really care about a lot of the things, honestly, that I did in high school. And I'm not trying to diminish the things that you care about. And a lot of y'all are probably much more mature than I was. But so many of those things, what I desired in a relationship, what I desired in so many ways that were just so worldly in high school, a lot of those struggles have gone away. High school is really hard, and you probably heard people say like, hey, it doesn't get any easier. It gets easier if you start trying. If you try to lift, maybe some of y'all can rep 225, but probably most of y'all can't rep 225 on the bench, which like probably most of y'all can't do that. Maybe a few of y'all can. Probably most of y'all can't do 135 on the bench. It can be heavy if you've never done it. But you know what? If you start lifting right now, and I'm 32, in 15, 20, 25 years, that 135 will be easy. It's not that it got easy, it's that you made it easy. So whatever you're dealing with, whether it's lust of the flesh, whether it's this pride of wanting to be the best, wanting to be the prettiest, wanting to be the most popular, wanting to be the richest, that is maybe holding you back from putting God first. And you think, I really want to put God first, but I'm having problems doing it because I really desire this. Unless you start working on those desires and exercising godliness, it's not going to get easier. My life as a Christian now at 32 is easier, not because I'm 32. In a lot of ways, it's so much harder. And the things that I go through on a weekly basis, no offense to you guys, you couldn't handle. It's not because I'm better than you, but it's because I've been practicing my faith for 15, 20 years longer than you. But I didn't just wake up at 32 being able to exercise and flex my spiritual muscles and handle the things that I do now. It's because I started at your age and I started listening to God. And yes, I walked away at times. And yes, I didn't always listen to everything the angel on my ear was telling me to do. But over time I did. And over time I realized, you know what? This lust of the flesh, this pride of life, all these things, not that they're non-existent, but I don't desire them near as much now. And that's so awesome. And if you want that too, all it takes is coming to God. He's anxiously waiting for you and listening to what He has to say. And just taking one step every little day, adding a little bit more weight to the bar every single day. And eventually, what used to be really hard for you spiritually, will be easy. But it's not going to just be easy because you woke up at 22 or 26 or 32 or 60. It's going to be because you work and work and work. All right. Have a good day. Thank y'all.
Stream on?